sentence. I, Lucy Connelly, confirm that I do not wish to enter a basis of plea, and I understand that this means I am conceding that at the point I published the tweet, I intended to incite as per the Category 1 feature. I do this as I do not believe I will be successful at a Newton hearing, and I do not want to risk my credit. This is my decision under no pressure from anyone else. I know, therefore, that this would be a Category 1A offence with a starting point of 3 years imprisonment. I mean, I don't know, the last time you signed...
Nigel Farage wrote in the Daily Mail that the only limit to free speech he accepts is incitement to violence. That is his stated principle, his line in the sand. The one thing he says should end your right to speak freely. So James O'Brien did something very simple. He found a legal document signed by Lucy Connelly, the woman Farage has been championing as Britain's favourite political prisoner, in which she explicitly states that when she published the tweet she was jailed for, she intended to incite. Her words, in a legal document, signed in front of her lawyer. By Farage's own standard, by the only limit he says he accepts, Lucy Connelly crossed the line. And Farage put her on stage at his party conference and gave her a standing ovation. This is Fool's Ballot. Subscribe if you are not already there, because this one is something else. Now let us get into it.
So let's turn our attention to this man's relationship with free speech. I told you yesterday I was struck by an article he wrote in the Daily Mail in which he said several things that were absolutely outrageous. For example, when Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper posted condolences online for Charlie Kirk, many were quick to point out that had Charlie been in the UK, Labour would probably have had him locked up. Again, you know, many who and why would they post condolences of someone that they would have locked up? And can we think of an example of somebody who has been locked up for expressing views similar in the public space to Charlie Kirk's? And by locked up, I mean imprisoned. You might perhaps think of Lucy Connelly, to whom we will turn our attention in a moment. And this is the bit that I accept, that I really thought was intriguing. Farage wrote in the Daily Mail on Friday, the Daily Mail, of course, which has a long and very unproud history of supporting fascism. I have always accepted, however, as I thought most people do, that there is just one limit to freedom of speech, and that is when you cross the line from argument and opinion over to incitement to violence. So hold that thought while we look at something else he said. If political or media figures launch ad hominem attacks on those they disagree with, repeatedly comparing their opponents to the Nazis or mass murderers, I think the case can be made that this amounts to incitement. After all, why would anybody bother debating reasonably with a Nazi? And that's an intervention of such epic unintelligence that you can probably forgive him for not realising how stupid he was being. If you call me a Nazi now, it doesn't make me a Nazi. What it makes you do is say, could I see some evidence, please, for why you would back this up? But what I want you to hold on to is the thought that Nigel Farage thinks that citing Adolf Hitler or Nazis when you are talking about public figures or politicians amounts to incitement, or he thinks the case can be made that this amounts to incitement. Here's Robert F. Kennedy Jr., currently Secretary of State for Health in Donald Trump's administration, speaking just a few years ago.
You can see that every statement that Donald Trump makes is fear-based. No, we have to be fear of the Muslims. We have to be fear of the black people, and particularly the big black guy, Obama, who's destroying this country, who's making everybody miserable, and only one person has the genius and the capacity to solve these things. You know, he's not like Hitler. Hitler had like a plan. You know, Hitler was interested in policy.
Kennedy there suggesting Donald Trump's a kind of Hitler without a plan. And here is the Vice President, J.D. Vance, speaking just a couple of years ago.
I'm a never Trump guy. Never liked him. Terrible candidate. Idiot if you voted for him. Might be America's Hitler. Might be a cynical a-hole. Cultural heroine. Noxious and reprehensible. Those are things that the left is going to come after you, and they're probably going to be put in ads should you be chosen as the VP pick. How do you deal with them now?
Yeah, well, I think the simple answer is you've got to respect the American people enough to just level with them. Look, I was wrong about Donald Trump. I didn't think he was going to be a good president, Brett. He was a great president.
Him to Hitler, though. J.D. Vance, the Vice President, talking to Fox News' Brett Baer there and making a comparison that Nigel Farage thinks amounts to incitement. So I don't know why the Fox News host is saying that the left will be coming after J.D. Vance, when Nigel Farage is no doubt going to be issuing a very, very strong condemnation of both of these comparisons by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and indeed by by J.D. Vance by mentioning Hitler in the context of discussing Donald Trump. The other element that is frankly remarkable is the claim that J.D. Vance made in the clip that Simon played to us about making personal attacks on people, which is essentially all that Donald Trump did for much of his political career. But I want to stay with Farage, if I may, and I want to talk to you about incitement, because this is what he actually wrote. The Daily Mail, I don't know whether they paid him or not, but if they did, perhaps they can get a refund. I have always accepted, however, as I thought most people do, that there is just one limit to freedom of speech, and that is when you cross the line from argument and opinion over to incitement to violence. You'll be familiar, of course, with Lucy Connelly. Here is a form that she signed in the presence of her lawyer before pleading guilty to the crimes for which she was imprisoned. And this cropped up, if anyone could be bothered to read it, in her appeal against the original sentence. I, Lucy Connelly, confirm that I do not wish to enter a basis of plea, and I understand that this means I am conceding that at the point I published the tweet, I intended to incite as per the Category 1 feature. I do this as I do not believe I will be successful at a Newton hearing, and I do not want to risk my credit. This is my decision under no pressure from anyone else. I know, therefore, that this would be a Category 1A offence with a starting point of 3 years imprisonment. I mean, I don't know the last time you signed a document saying, I confirm that I published the tweet, that when I published the tweet, I intended to incite as per the category. Nigel Farage's view on free speech is that when you cross the line from argument and opinion over to incitement to violence, your freedom of speech becomes unsustainable. Lucy Connelly signs a document stating that at the point she published the tweet she was jailed for, she intended to incite. So what does a man who says that incitement is the point at which free speech should be restricted, how does a man like that deal with a woman who signs, who literally states in legal documents that she published a tweet intended to incite? How could that possibly play out? How could Farage's insistence that incitement is the point at which free speech should cease to apply square with a woman who admits literally incitement? And in fact, it goes further. During this appeal, the court found, and I quote, "We regret to have to say that we found the evidence of the applicant about these important matters incredible. Her evidence to this court showed her to be intelligent and articulate, with strong views, and, because of the circumstances in which her son died, a deep mistrust of anyone who might be regarded as a person in authority telling her what to do or to believe. Given her personal circumstances at the time of her arrest and her understandable concern for her daughter, any reference to a prison sentence, let alone a sentence based on a starting point of 3 years, must have caused her great anxiety. In those circumstances, we are quite unable to accept that she signed the endorsement without any understanding of its references to the culpability factor or the starting point. We are also unable to accept her state of ignorance in that regard continued throughout further conferences with Mr. Muir, or that she entered her guilty plea with no understanding of what it entailed. Her acceptance that she read and was content with Mr. Muir's sentencing note," this is her original lawyer, "which includes references to the sentencing guideline and to the aggravating feature specifically mentioned in the guideline, clearly shows that she was well aware of what she was admitting." So again, how does a man who insists that incitement is the point at which freedom of speech ceases to apply and should not apply deal with a woman who admits to incitement, conscious incitement, and when she tries to get her sentence reduced by claiming that she didn't know what she was admitting to, the court comes about as close as it can in legal terms to calling her a liar? How on earth would Nigel Farage deal with somebody like Lucy Connelly, who has clearly committed a crime of incitement, which he says is the point at which freedom of speech should no longer apply? Well, I think you already know.
She's a wonderful mum, wife, beloved childminder, little kids from every corner of the earth she's taken wonderful care of. So I am, of course, referring to Britain's favourite political prisoner. Ladies and gentlemen, please give the warmest of welcomes to Lucy Connelly.
I suppose we should be grateful that it wasn't Andrea Jenkins singing the theme tune, but that was a Daily Telegraph columnist called Alison Pearson and somebody called Liam Halligan welcoming to the stage of Nigel Farage's current political party a woman who has, by his own account, breached the threshold at which he feels free speech should no longer apply, being introduced as a political prisoner by some of his cronies at his own conference. I don't know what the word is to describe that, because the words I can think of don't come close. She was also, of course, photographed in a warm embrace with Mr. Farage, which is one reason perhaps to extend sympathy to her. But the idea that you can be simultaneously guilty of incitement and that incitement can be the point at which free speech no longer applies and that Nigel Farage can be a trusted agent when it comes to discussing free speech is yet another mark of just how mad things have already become.
What James O'Brien did in that segment is one of the cleanest pieces of political dismantling you will see anywhere this year, and it deserves to be understood properly because the technique matters as much as the conclusion. He did not argue with Farage's position on free speech. He accepted it. He took Farage's own stated principle. The only limit is incitement, and he applied it consistently to the people Farage is defending and the people Farage is attacking. And the moment you do that, the hypocrisy becomes impossible to ignore. Start with J.D. Vance and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Both of them compared Donald Trump to Hitler. Vance called Trump America's Hitler. Kennedy said Hitler at least had a plan implying Trump did not even rise to that level. Now, Farage has argued that comparing politicians to Nazis or Hitler amounts to incitement. Those are his words in the Daily Mail. So by his own stated principle, his closest political ally's vice president and his closest political ally's health secretary have both committed what Farage considers incitement. Has Farage condemned them? Not once. Not a word. Because the principle was never really about incitement. It was about who is doing the comparing and who is being compared. When his opponents compare his allies to Hitler, it is incitement. When his allies compare his opponents to Hitler, it is apparently just free speech. Then there is the Lucy Connelly document, and this is where the argument becomes completely indefensible. Lucy Connelly did not just say something that could be interpreted as incitement. She signed a legal document in front of her lawyer explicitly stating that at the point she published the tweet, she intended to incite. Those are not O'Brien's words. They are not the prosecution's interpretation. They are Connelly's own words in her own handwriting in a document she signed knowingly. The court also found during her appeal that when she tried to claim she did not understand what she was admitting to, she was, to put it as plainly as the legal language allows, not telling the truth. So here is where we are. Farage says the only limit to free speech is incitement. Connelly signed a document saying she intended to incite. By Farage's own principle, Connelly crossed the only line he recognizes. And Farage's response to that was to invite her onto the stage at his party conference, describe her as Britain's favorite political prisoner, embrace her in a warm photograph, and have his associates give her a standing ovation. That is not a small inconsistency. That is not a nuanced position being misrepresented. That is a man whose stated principle is directly contradicted by his own actions toward a woman who admitted in writing to violating that principle. And this is the thing about free speech as a political weapon rather than a political principle. It is always selectively applied. For Farage and for Trump, and for the entire MAGA movement on both sides of the Atlantic, free speech means the freedom to say what we want to say without consequence. It does not mean the freedom for everyone to say what they want to say. When a comedian mocks Trump, it is an attack. When a journalist asks a difficult question, it is fake news. When a court jails someone who signed a document admitting she intended to incite a riot, it is political persecution. But when Trump's allies compare his opponents to murderers and dictators, that is just telling it like it is. The principle is not free speech. The principle is our speech is free and yours is not. O'Brien named this clearly and calmly without raising his voice. That is the most powerful way to expose it. Not by arguing against the principle, but by holding the people claiming the principle to account for whether they actually believe it. They do not. And the receipts prove it. This is Fool's Ballot. Hit the like button, drop your thoughts in the comments below, subscribe to the channel if you are not already there, and share this with someone who still thinks Farage genuinely believes in free speech. I will see you in the next one.